everyone. So my name is Lizzy Joslyn. I am a junior at Mizzou, and I am studying strategic communications. So I'll just go ahead and jump right into it. So tonight I'll be talking to you about the concept of faith. And I was actually kind of randomly inspired to give this talk. I was listening to music one night, and I heard a song called Even If by Mercy Me, and if you haven't heard it, I highly encourage you to listen to it. It's a beautiful song. I'd actually heard it dozens of times before, but it was like I was hearing it for the first time all of a sudden when I heard these lyrics. I know you're able, and I know you can. Save through the fire with your mighty hand, but even if you don't, my hope is you alone. And I heard those lyrics and I thought, wow, that is faith. So I kind of got to thinking a little more into what does faith look like for me in my life? And I came up with the definition of faith. So I'm going to put that there. So faith is a detachment from human emotions, preferences, ideas, and plans in following Christ. I'll say that again. Emotions, preferences, ideas, and plans. Now, that being said, faith takes humility, most fundamentally. And in being humble, we as humans primarily fight pride. Pride is the root of all sin, essentially because it means that we're thinking that our plan is better than God's plan. And so that's part of why it's so difficult for us to have humility, to have faith. And so from this humility stems trust, and trust that his plan is better. So a great example of this, a lot of you have probably heard, but Jesus gives the example of a child in the Bible. And he says, whoever takes the lowly position of this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Lowly position, meaning having the greatest humility. Being willing to have a superior lead you wherever you go, walking through the grocery store, holding your mom or dad's hand. We should be holding Christ's hand and letting him lead us. That's what that looks like. So in my main struggle with pride, we all have them, but I think the primary struggle that I have is chasing after human acceptance in various forms. I love people. I love talking to them, connecting with them, hearing their stories, and that's something that I began to idolize as I realized that about myself. So it came to a point where I was struggling with that sin. I had kind of a foot in two worlds at one point. I was going to Mass. I was raised Catholic. I was just like, okay, I'm going to go through the motions. Don't really know what this means, but I'm just going to do it. Go to Mass on Sundays, and then every other day, I'm going to do what I want. I was straddling. Yeah, things I've struggled. Certain? Amazing. I like to talk with my hands. I was afraid I was going to anyway, so I had a foot in two worlds, and I think a lot of us struggle with that. I mean, we all struggle with it continuously, right? Lukewarm faith. I did a lot of introspection, a lot of prayer, kind of realized this and thought, I really need to shift my weight, one way or the other. And it was a long process of really just praying, deciding, and I thought of this quote, kind of to explain to you guys my struggle. Sarah Swafford says, "You simply cannot find your worth in the gaze of another human." And realizing that, I was like, I need to find my worth somewhere divine, somewhere immortal, somewhere everlasting. So one thing in particular that was really crippling me with this, I was in a long-time relationship with a guy, year and a half, and I went to him for everything. He was my everything. I was making him my idol. And that was the primary source where I was searching for what I thought was love. And of course, the root of that, as I explained earlier, is I like my plan better. I just want to stay with him. Even though I know it's holding me back from pursuing a relationship with Christ, I want to stay with him. So I just kind of stubbornly stayed in that. So Eventually, I came to an ultimatum and decided to go all in with my faith. Let's go back to the definition that I said earlier of faith. It's the detachment from human emotions, preferences, ideas, and plans in following Christ. Now, I didn't want to end this relationship. I knew it wasn't going to be easy. My emotions were saying otherwise, very much so. I preferred not to. In my own plan and based on my own ideas, I would have stayed with this guy. But like I said, I decided, okay, it's time to shift my weight and go all in and see what this is all about. And in that, I quickly found that relying on Christ for these things, just opening the door a little bit, kind of making that decision to shift my weight, Christ swung the door open for me. And relying on that, relying on Him to do, to open the door wide for you, that was absolutely key in that leap of faith that I took. So always remember, if you make one move, Christ is going to come towards you with the utmost love. He will chase you. He pursues you every day. Remember that. After the breakup, it definitely, of course, it wasn't glamorous. It never is. I think a lot of us know that. But Christ did amazing things in my life even through that. In my healing, in my suffering, when my wound was wide open, I clung to Christ through that. And instead of going and talking to my boyfriend or going and talking to friends, I learned to talk to Jesus and I learned to pray. And that's how I started to build that relationship with Him. And it was so worth it. It was really hard. It was probably one of the hardest things I've done so far in my life, just because I so value human connection. But it was so worth it. And I don't think worth it are like strong enough words to describe that. Sometimes I struggle with like the English language, like there aren't words strong enough. But it was so worth it. And I have found truly so much peace like never before. Like I would never be able to find from the human connection alone. Found so much joy, genuine friendships, excitement, and new adventures. And I always like to think of St. Pope John Paul II, his quote, "Life with Christ is an adventure." And I can totally attest to that. So I'll touch a little bit on suffering, because I did note that it was difficult, and I went through suffering. And I think suffering is kind of a tough topic, in the sense that, you're like, does Christ allow suffering? No, He does not. But He works through it in order to bring good to your life. And suffering, it looks different for everyone. My suffering isn't going to look like your suffering. Everyone goes through different things. But suffering is important. In fact, it's necessary in our faith. Suffering is it's necessary in being genuinely faithful. So let's go back to the song lyrics that I opened with. I know you're able, and I know you can, save through the fire with your mighty hand. But even if you don't, my hope is you alone. This is also about suffering, because the person who wrote this song was suffering. He said, I know what you're capable of doing, God. If He wanted to save me from this pain, He would, but my suffering is necessary for me to grow closer to and to glorify God. So I'm going to use it. I heard once, don't waste your suffering. Use it to grow closer to Christ. He will work through it. And also, very importantly, suffering rids us of ourselves, which is humility. And we need that to gain trust in order to gain faith. So, it seems ridiculous now, kind of looking back and thinking, I had like a foot in two worlds. Like one, this beautiful, like divine love, everlasting, and then all these worldly, like temporary things. That it kind of seems like choosing between my plan, like what I had in mind, a human with limited everything, and the plan of the one who literally invented existence as we know it. Seems like a no-brainer, but it takes that humility through prayer and through Christ. God wanted me to humble myself. He wanted me to look at myself and say, no, I don't want me, I want you. God, like, rid me of all that I am. Just fill me with you alone. And so I always love to pray in terms of humility. I love to pray through Galatians 2:20. I can put that up there. And it goes, I have been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but he who lives in me. And the life I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loves me and gave his life for me. Let that sink in. It is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. When you give yourself to Christ, beautiful things happen. Beautiful things. And they can be difficult at times, but they're beautiful because Christ brings good out of everything. I always like to think of as well the most perfect example of suffering, which is Christ crucified. And I heard this example once in a talk from Leah Darrow, actually. I had just cited her there. She's wonderful, again, if you don't know who she is. But so she talked about how the guards were struggling to get the other two men who they were crucifying down on the cross. The men were resisting. And so finally, the guards finished them and came over to Jesus. And Jesus, you guys, Jesus was already laying on the cross. He was looking up at the guards and saying, I'm ready. I'm ready to take these nails for humanity. Imagine him looking at you and saying, I love you. I'm ready to do this for you. That is the most beautiful example of suffering. So, now I invite you all to kind of reflect on your own lives. Think of something you know you need to let go in your life to take a leap of faith, to get closer to Christ. And it's so different for everyone. So just think about what that might be for you. And be honest with yourself. Be vulnerable. Christ wants to see every part of you. He wants to know every part of you, even the parts that are scarred, that are flawed, because he loves all of you, because that is you. So don't be afraid to be honest with yourself and with Christ about that. So think about that. And under your chair, there's a piece of paper. I invite you to write that one thing down on that paper. And we'll collect them and put them at the foot of Jesus up here when we have adoration. I invite you to do that because we're presenting these to Christ. And we're giving these up to Christ. So as you think, as you pray and ponder and write about what that one thing might be for you, I just want to say a few things. 1, you are called to be holy, meaning close to God. You. This isn't some unreachable, unattainable goal. And this isn't a matter of do this, do that, just for the sake of rules. This is what God literally wanted for your purpose when he made you. This is who you truly are. Ask yourself, is the purpose of my creation rooted in how I live? I want this for you because I love you. But more importantly, Christ wants this for you because he loves you. And he wants to be close to you, a beloved son or daughter whom he carefully fashioned and whom he continues to carry each and every single day. The fact that you can't do this, the fact that you can't let go of this, is a lie. It's a lie. Given that you make it a point not to rely on yourself alone, but on God solely. As Mother Teresa says, give yourself fully to God. He will use you to accomplish great things on the condition that you believe much more in his love than in your own weakness. This is your chance, now or never. This is the moment for which you were created.